Welcome to New Media Lab. I am Rob Southgate. Today I have the real Brian from Profitcast. Brian is a lot of fun to have on, very informative. Martha and I were fortunate enough to be interviewed by Brian on Profitcast a couple months ago. At that point, we asked if he would reciprocate and be on our show, and boom, here we are. Really in store for a treat, everybody. Enjoy. Brian, thank you so much for joining me on my show this time.
Oh, you are so welcome. Thank you for having me. This is great. I know you were on my show, and now I get to come over here and hang out with you.
It was a real honor. Martha and I had such a great time being on your show, and we've had such great feedback. When Martha is actually the one that came up with the concept of doing this new media lab, the first name that came up was yours.
Oh, wow.
So
that's nice. Thank you.
It's all true too. So the premise of the show, I know that at this point, to the listener, they've heard it because we've had a few out, but we haven't posted any at this point. There's a little trick for you podcasters out there. Batch some things, hold some back, get it right, and then release it.
Love it.
And here we are. You're actually my fifth interview, so you don't know what this is about. I'm going to set it up again. On the other shows, I didn't set it up as much, so I'm going to do it here. We're a new media lab. We're talking podcasting, blogging, video, all that new media stuff. And you do Profitcast. You do geek podcasting. I want to talk about podcasting with you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts, I want to get into your background. What can you tell us about yourself? How'd you get into it? How'd you start in podcasting? Go for it, Brian.
Oh my gosh. Well, so the passion behind the microphone is kind of what I call it. It's funny too, because when somebody says, "So what are you doing these days?" and I say, I'm podcasting, and they say, "What?
What's that?"
I say, "I get behind the mic for a living." They go, "Oh, how does that work?" So that's kind of my fun thing to do now. But I started kind of with a passion to get behind the microphone when I was a lot younger, and I kind of had this passion when I saw Wolfman Jack, doing a radio show, and I thought, man, I want to be a radio disc jockey. I want to share music with people, play music, and just do what he does. It's awesome.
And have that glorious beard.
Well, I you
don't have that. I know.
I can grow the beard. That's one thing. I'm not a beard guy.
Yeah, right.
but I can do the full thing. It's awesome. So I don't have the what do they call it? The spotty beard?
Yeah, right. Where it's just like patches. Yeah.
I thought if I was going to grow a beard, it needs to be a ZZ Top. I mean, like the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a commitment. One of those.
I go
beards.
for the Stephen Amell, Oliver Queen look, where it's just kind of that stubble. Because I don't like to shave either.
No, we're podcasters. I live in pajama pants. I have stubble all the time.
But it's the new thing now.
Yeah. Well, it's come around. I'm actually kind of hip. It's like when grunge hit.
Yeah.
And we laugh about how, wearing ripped up jeans and stuff like that, became in fashion. We're like, yeah, we were already doing that.
Yeah.
Not a fashion statement.
Yep.
We were just dirty, I think.
Well, I still shower. So
there you go.
There is that. I got to do that much.
Wow, we're getting deep on this interview, aren't we?
So anyway, I started back behind the microphone in middle school and then kind of going into high school, and that's when I started doing the friends would get together and we'd record into a cassette. So this is funny. I'll share this one. I had an old Radio Shack microphone. It's probably $10 or $20 microphone, and I duct taped it to the end of a broomstick, and then I hung the broomstick from a hook on the ceiling so that it would actually look like a boom arm.
That's fantastic.
And we'd sit there on these stools, and we'd record these radio shows into a cassette tape player, because they didn't have burning CD technology really going very full back then. So, it was a lot of fun. We did that. And then I decided I did some shadowing with one of the local DJs in my hometown as well. So that was a lot of fun just to kind of get a feel for what they did in the studio and learn how to use the equipment. And then I decided I'm going to start a high school radio station for my high school. And I wanted to clarify that. So it was a lot of fun to be able to do that.
No, wait. One thing, you were in high school at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to be clear about that. Okay.
Yeah. So I was in high school and I was kind of doing the, hey, I want to start a radio station. Now, not like an actual frequency station, but something where, it broadcasts all over the speakers to all the rooms in the entire school and that kind of thing. We'd do it in the morning,
Sure.
lunchtime, afternoon, stuff like that. And the idea was, one, I wanted to do it because it was a passion, but two, I thought there could be an opportunity here where we could create an environment where people could be encouraged. So teachers would come in, they'd hear requests they'd like, they'd be encouraged, they'd have better attitudes and moods. Same with the students, play their requests, talk to them, make them feel like they're a part of a community. And the whole idea was to raise morale and, really encourage people and get everybody's day off to a great start. That was the point.
Sure.
So long story short, we started that. There was quite a bit of opposition to get that started, which was interesting from some of the faculty, but we did get it going. Ended up being an awesome success. And I got the bug at that point. Like I was going, this is so much fun. I get to be the voice of my high school and people like it. And the statistics actually showed they did an actual, I don't know, some kind of a statistic review or whatever, showing that fights were down, morale was up, everybody was happier. It was just a better environment for that high school than it's ever been. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So, at that point I thought, all right, graduated, heyday was over because, you're at the top of your game in high school and you go to college and nobody cares about you.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I did radio in college on an actual radio station, which was a lot of fun. And did that for a couple years. And then did radio on and off as an actual career on terrestrial radio stations. And then kind of moved in. Because again, the dream was I want to be a radio DJ. I want a morning show, and I want to be able to eventually own my own radio station.
Sure.
Unfortunately, terrestrial radio was on its way out. It's still going strong, but
and even as it declined, and it's still in a state of decline, there's still that barrier to entry that it makes it so it squashes dreams.
Totally does.
I have a good story, but I want to keep hearing yours. I got a good story for you. You're going to appreciate.
Well, sure. And, I'll share that because this was something that really created the pivot for me was that, when I first started getting into radio in high school, it was basically at the end of its heyday, but it was still in its heyday. And I remembered that, DJs were celebrities. And, if they showed up at a live event, people came to see the DJ. And I remember there were still live DJs that would work regardless of whether it was an overnight or not. And I remember that DJs had personality and they could talk and they could do things. And when I was getting into radio myself after college, which, this was only maybe 8 years later, that's when I started noticing it was all about voice tracking, which if you're not familiar with voice tracking, it is, I know you are, but if your listeners are not, you record your show in advance and it gets played with a computer plays it, plays all the music. You don't touch the music. You don't pick the music.
Right.
It's all random pretty much, or a program director programs it. But the point is that there's really no more personality. You have to read scripts. And interestingly enough, this actually just happened on Sunday. We saw one of the local radio stations that I used to work for at an outdoor event. And it was, probably two interns. They looked like interns sitting there on their phones, looking bored. No one else was there. It was just playing music. No one was at the booth. No DJs, no personality, nothing. And I'm like, wow, how this has changed.
Right. It's so different. Yeah.
Oh. And it was demoralizing for me because I wanted to do that. So then somebody said, hey, become an internet radio, do that, create an internet radio station online because that's the future. So I thought, sure, I'll do that. And I created a couple of internet radio stations and we got excited and we put all of our efforts and money and time into it. And 2 years later, it's obsolete. Wait, what?
Yeah.
And that was kind of my radio career. And that's when I was starting to learn about podcasting and how digital media was obviously becoming very popular. Spotify was in the US. Pandora was going strong. Podcasting's where it's at. Get into it. And that's how I started into podcasting. And then I could tell you about my podcasting journey here in a minute, but I want to hear your story.
Okay. I got to tell the radio story because there are people that are listening that will be people that had the same dreams. I had those dreams too.
Yeah.
So, okay. A friend of mine, I was up in Minneapolis, and a friend of mine worked at a sports radio station. He had the same dream. He wanted to be, on the radio personality, and it's not about the fame. It's about the sharing and about the connection.
Yeah.
And there's something about being in that position and the fun and everything. So this friend of mine, he said he worked at it. He went to school for it, gets a job at a sports station. There's a big popular show in the afternoon. and they have these segments, and he was one of the segments. I forgot what, maybe talking about the St. Paul Saints or something like that. And his segment started to track as very popular because, as you know, in radio, they count like every minute what's happening. They watch everything and they say, oh, this segment's popular. We need to do more of this and, whatever. So his segment was becoming really popular to the point that the guy whose show it was pulled him aside and said, look, kid, this is the time you need to strike. You need to go in. You need to try to lobby to get a bigger slot or a raise. And my friend goes, oh, great. I'm doing it. I'm doing this thing, right? So he goes in and he said he sees the program director in the hall. He says, can I talk to you guys? He says, yeah, sure. He said he brings him into his office. Swear to you, this is the story. He said the guy says, hey, why don't you have a seat? My friend sits down. Guy turns around, goes behind his desk. There's a file cabinet there, one of those big open like armoire type file cabinets. He opens it up and he said it looked like a cartoon. All these tapes come pouring out. They're hitting the guy in the head, all over the face. And my friend is going, what the heck? Guy turns to him and says, these are all people that want your job. What'd you want to talk about? I mean, if that's not radio and what squashes your dreams, that was it right there.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience with that when I came in to do radio and I was doing stuff. And then I would say, hey, I'd like to do this. What do you think? And they would say, stop challenging our ideas. And
right.
I actually got told once too, you're way too energetic. You need to calm down behind the microphone. I was like, you're having me do a disco dance party.
That sounds like the opposite of what you really want to have happen.
Oh my gosh. The bureaucracy used to drive me crazy. Well, and here's the other thing. I mean, this goes, I know, industry wide, regardless of which industry you're in. I know this is just the way it is, but this was in radio a lot too. They moved a guy who was a fantastic DJ and program director into the general manager position.
Okay.
And he destroyed the station.
Yep.
Because he could not manage people at all.
Yeah, that's not his skill set.
No, he was promoted to his highest level of incompetency. So it's like, at that point, you just got to be careful. But that happened all the time with radio.
Yeah.
I got so fed up with it. I was just like, I can't do this anymore because, oh my gosh, I could go on for stories. I actually got chewed out by a program director once because I was trying to suggest new things. and he chewed me out for 41 minutes straight, no breath almost. And I was just, and he even said, I'm going to do everything in my power to destroy your career. And I'm just like, I don't need this. And I quit the next day and they're like, why would you quit? I'm like, are you kidding?
Are you kidding? Yeah, right. Okay, so that brings us to now. That brings us to now, yeah.
So, well, one thing I was excited about podcasting. And what was interesting, though, about podcasting is that I thought, well, I don't get to share music unless I do a music show. It's a talk show. And I thought, well, I've always loved doing the talk stuff, but this is different because when you're a radio DJ, you can rely on music if you don't have much to say. If you're like, I don't know, okay, here's a song, boom, go for it, But when you're doing a podcast, I mean, you're monologuing or dialoguing for a while.
Yeah.
And that's a difference. It's a different talent. So, but anyway, I got into it. I did a couple of podcasts for a little while. They went relatively well. Unfortunately, I didn't really know what I was doing. So, the show itself was actually a success, but the marketing kind of bombed. And, then I got in because I was doing a music show and I actually got into the politics of the music industry, which ended up being, again, more work than it was worth. So I pod faded there. But that's when I said, I can't get away from being on the microphone because I did it for a couple of years. I got away from it. I came back. I got away from it. I came back. I'm like, I just can't not be behind the mic because that's just who I am. It's a passion. And I want to find out, though, how do I make a living doing this? How do I actually pay the bills? And most of the people that I sought advice from said, good luck. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And if it does, it's going to be, very minimal because only 1 to 3% of podcasters actually make any livable income from podcasting, which I get, but I also think is not the way it should be. So I went into this idea of creating a business and a podcast around, I'm going to be a guinea pig and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to experiment and learn how to actually grow a podcast, profit with a podcast. And I'm going to interview experts that have done one or the other and find out what they've done. And, in a way that we can all learn and then utilize these pieces of advice to implement with our own podcasts. So that's where Profitcast started. And I went on this journey. And it's been a very interesting journey. It's been very difficult.
Yeah.
It's been very rewarding at the same time. But that's really what started the journey for where I'm at today. Although if I jump back a year prior to Profitcast, this was another interesting thing is that I found out there was a network called TV Talk that was starting, and they were paying podcasters.
Yes.
We
have some of those people working for us.
Yeah. To come on and talk about TV shows. And I said, wait, hold on. You're paying people to talk about TV shows? Like what?
Yeah.
So I applied and I got 2 shows.
Oh, wow. So you actually got paid.
I did. I got paid to talk about Arrow and Big Bang Theory. And I also got paid to be a producer for between 10 and 13 shows, depending on what shows were going.
Wow.
On a weekly basis. And I thought, this is amazing. And I made a full-time living doing this, and I worked 20 hours a week. And I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And I thought, dude, nobody could do it. I got totally cocky because gosh darn it, that was awesome. And I was awesome.
Yeah. You felt like you cracked the code, right?
Oh, man. And yeah, people were like, well, here's the thing, though. I had actually I had gotten out of a business I was in, and I was really trying to make ends meet, and I was really struggling to make ends meet. And this came along, and I got cocky. And then it ended.
Yep.
And I've learned my lesson on that little arrogant thing. So I will tell you this, though. It was a really neat opportunity because I met so many people that I'm still in contact with today and have made great friendships with. But my gosh, they paid well. It was awesome. Unfortunately, the model didn't work the way that it was intended to. And so, TV Talk shut down. But the rest, many of us banded together and Kevin and I at the time continued Arrow. It was TV Talk Arrow. We rebranded it to Arrow Squad, which is what we're still doing.
Yep.
And now, of course, we have Emily joining us now. So it's the triumvirate is what I like to call it. The mighty triumvirate.
It's still a squad, though. So still appropriately titled.
It's been phenomenal. And many of our listeners that were with us in the beginning are still with us. And we've created some great friendships with that. And that honestly is really what sparked the passion of podcasting for me that much more. Like if I hadn't been doing Arrow Squad, I don't know if I'd have quite the passion I have right now.
Sure.
So that's been a beautiful thing. And then Profitcast. So those were the 2 shows I was working on. And during this last year plus of Profitcast, I'm going, I have to make money because I'm running out of it and I don't have money to pay my bills. I don't know what to do. And everyone's like, you got to go teach. I'm like, I don't want to teach. I'm a performer. I want to perform. How do I make money performing?
Yeah.
So
that is
kind
the
of
trick.
leads us up to the last couple of months.
So let's jump into that because one of the ideas of the show here is to talk about not only the different types of media but how people are doing it. And I've listened to quite a number of your shows, and you're not doing things that others haven't talked about, but you're actually doing some of those things. Mm-hmm. So what are you doing right now? I mean, you've got Profitcast, obviously, and Arrow Squad, mm-hmm. but you have started doing some, I know when we talked before, you were doing some consulting and you kind of felt that wasn't the route, mm-hmm. but you've gone more towards corporate, haven't you?
Yeah, well, so the consulting, I do have one client that has worked out perfectly, and it's been just an amazing fit. And so he and I are still working together.
Okay, fantastic.
It's a different type of consulting. It's the type of consulting that I would love to, continue to do with people, which is helping them with their actual podcast, the performance, how it's coming across, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But most people really want the nuts and bolts, how to step-by-step curriculum of how do I market myself better? How do I make money? And I'm more of a mindset guy.
Right.
And people don't think mindset's important at all. It's amazing how many people have said, well, that's just fluff. And I said, 80% of success, if not more, is mindset. And if you don't get the mindset right, all of the nuts and bolts you've learned won't make a difference. And I am a living testimony to that. So that's why the consulting didn't work out, which is fine. It's not really what I wanted to do in the first place, for the most part.
Hey, you tried something, and that's actually the key.
Yeah.
You tried something, and who knows, you may have evolved it into something else, which actually is kind of what you did.
Yeah. So the interesting thing with this is, again, I kept saying over and over and over and over and over, and I didn't say this on Profitcast very much just because people would get tired of it, but people that I talk to, friends, family, that kind of thing, like, I just want to get paid to perform, and I don't know how to do it. And I did seek advice, and one person said, find someone who has done what you're wanting to do and go get advice from them. So I did. And the irony was, I don't know if they didn't know the answer or what, but I never got an answer from them. I said, how did you do what you do? And they talked around in circles, but never answered the question.
Sure.
And this was multiple people. And I thought, you really don't know how you got paid to perform.
Right.
And so it was still this was actually as of New Media Expo. So we're talking April, May now of this year. I still didn't have an answer. But I knew I wanted to get paid to perform. And so somebody had said something about, because it really did come back to this whole idea of how do you do that. But I would say, let's say June or July, I got 5 or 6 phone calls from separate friends and colleagues, didn't talk to each other, had no idea I was really thinking about trying to find a way to get paid to perform. I was in a conversation with Addie about this one at the time, saying like, can we find companies we can do this for? And she's like, yeah, I don't know how though. But I got 5 separate phone calls from people in about a week's period from friends who basically all said, why don't you go talk to a company or an individual or an entrepreneur or an organization and ask to host a podcast for them? You do it all. They pay you. They don't have to worry about a thing.
Right.
All 5 people said the exact same thing in a week's period. And I'm thinking, okay, I get the message. I know that's what I want to do. I'm totally going after it, but I don't know how to do it.
Right.
And the next week I get a call from Nick at audiobooks.com, who I had connected with about other things with podcasting, affiliate stuff and sponsorship things. And he, for some reason, thought of me first, contacts me and says, I got to pick your brain. We want to start a podcast, but we just need to know how to do it. Like what goes into it. So after our conversation of me kind of telling him what goes into a podcast, he said, well, here's the thing. We don't want to do it. We want someone else to host it. Do you know of anyone? I thought, no way.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, right?
I said, I'll do it. Absolutely, I'll do it. And he said, really? Well, let's talk. And then, the rest is history at that point. At that time, Jody Smith calls me up and he says, why don't you pitch John Lee Dumas? And I thought, why would John need me?
Yeah, he's got his own thing going.
Yeah. And I thought, whatever. So I I blew him off because I had no confidence at that point for John, even though John and I had been in conversation and I knew John listened to Profitcast and, we'd built a friendship since January. I didn't have the confidence to approach him about something like that.
Right.
So I let it go. And audiobooks, we worked it out. Addie joined me. They wanted a female co-host to have that male-female perspective. I mean, it just worked out. It was awesome. And all of a sudden, I got a surge of confidence, weeks later. And I said, I'm emailing John. I got nothing to lose.
Wow.
I emailed him and I said, dude, I just got my first paid gig to host a podcast for somebody. And I said, check this out. I'm so excited. And I said, and that brings me to my idea for you. And I just laid it out, sent him a pitch. I'm expecting him to go, that's really great. Congratulations. We don't need that, but thanks.
Or thanks. I'm going to go do this right now. Thanks.
Well, and I was a little concerned about that. I was like,
yeah.
He might steal this idea and do it himself. I mean, I don't know, but I'm thinking, I don't think John's like that, but anybody could, right?
You never know. I mean, yeah, that's how the world works.
Exactly. So that was a risk I took, but I thought, whatever, we'll see. And I'm in a theater getting ready to watch a movie. And, I was turning my phone basically to silent and I realized that he had emailed and I said, oh, I got to read this really quick.
Yeah, right.
And he writes back, he goes, I love this idea. Let's talk.
Wow.
Like, oh my gosh. He said, yes. So I kind of freaked out and had a moment, but so I am officially co-hosting the audiobooks.com podcast with Addie, and I'm hosting the Podcaster's Paradise podcast that just launched for John and for the Paradise and Fire Nation communities. And holy cow. I mean, and we're in the process of pitching some new companies. This is something I'm going to do full time now. So I didn't know it was possible. And a lot of people told me it wasn't. And a lot of advisors and people that I trusted told me I should have quit Profitcast a long time ago.
Well, then you talked to us and we told you don't quit.
I know.
And
thank you, by the way.
Actually, it's funny because I have this conversation all the time and we had it on Profitcast. To us, our philosophy here is the money part of it comes from everything around the podcast. Yeah, there's the handful that make it off the podcast, but what you're seeing is it's because you stayed with it. It's because you were being driven by your passion that you actually reached the point where you could make money.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not the way they teach you in college. That's for sure.
No. I can tell you, Rob, that I can't even remember how many times I wanted to give up. because it was a struggle. And I mean, it wasn't even just a year. Like, this has been 7 years in the making kind of thing.
Right.
And getting to this point to be able to do podcasting, because it's funny. A lot of people will say, well, wow, you sound so natural behind the microphone. And I said, you should have heard me 3-4 years ago. I mean, I got to practice on 30 listeners. I was bad.
Right.
I went from being a radio disc jockey who introduced music to learning how to do a talk show, which, like I said, it's not easy to transition into that.
Yep.
And I mean, the fact that I got to where I'm at is because of years and years of practice and practicing 6-7 days a week consistently on getting better at what I did. But even then, even when people were saying, man, you're so natural behind the mic and I love your show, I still couldn't succeed and make money. And I'm like, what's wrong? And it really came down to, I was not being true to myself. I was not being the best me. I was not doing what I knew I needed to do because people told me it wasn't possible. And I listened to that. And so I went off on things that everyone else thought I should do, which wasn't going to work for me. And I almost gave up on Profitcast probably 3 or 4 times. And I almost quit Aero Squad back in May because I was so frustrated and down. And if I had quit those, I would never be experiencing what I'm experiencing right now at all.
They always say that you always feel like quitting just before something is going to work. It's always that moment. And we have to tell ourselves that all the time. I make no bones about it. I almost daily have a feeling of, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm driven by the passion. I can't help it. I feel like I can't help but do this.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are days where I say, yeah, but I'd like to be able to buy a gallon of gas and not think about it. I mean, but it's just how it is. And eventually it'll come.
It's interesting because my wife told me that right when I was getting ready to quit Aero Squad. And I really actually wasn't going to quit, but I was so close because I was just overwhelmed.
Right. You let yourself explore that possibility.
Yes. And she said, I don't think you'll forgive yourself if you do that, is what she said about Aero Squad. And I said, you're right. Let me give it some downtime. And that went away pretty quickly. I was like, that was just a fleeting decision in the midst of pressure and stress.
Right.
Nothing I really would beat myself up if I would have done that. But right before I did that episode on Profitcast called the last episode of Profitcast, she and I were having that conversation about quitting Profitcast because it had been about a year, was making no money. I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills. We had $47 left on our checking account. And I'm like, this is scary. And I told her, I said, I got to quit and go get a job or something because this isn't working.
Yeah.
And she goes, I just have this feeling that you are right around the corner from something happening. And I'm like, okay, I'll persevere. I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm going to persevere. And literally a couple of weeks later is when all this stuff started going down.
That's amazing, Brian. But you know what? It's how it works. And I think that's what the takeaway from this show is going to be for people. Is if you really want this, if you get bitten by the bug, because it is a bug, almost everybody that we've ever given this opportunity to podcast for us, they're infected. I mean, they're just like, I just want to do this,
Yeah.
And if you have that and you persevere, I mean, you don't know what the future is going to look like.
Yeah.
But look where you're at and you're having fun with it. Would you have thought that was going to be the future?
No. Not at all.
No.
Yeah.
So, okay. I'm going to shift gears on this because there are a couple of questions that I try to ask during this show to see what people have to say about it. You've given great insights that I know people are going to take with this. As a podcaster, because this episode is obviously focusing on podcasting, but everything can be applied to other forms of media or business.
Mm-hmm.
Is there this is going to be a really big envelope of a question. Is there a strategy you would recommend for people that want to succeed in podcasting? I told you it's a big one, man.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot that goes into that to answer that question.
Narrow it down, boil it down to something small that you can say, here's a nugget for you. Because I know for me personally, it's those nuggets that drove everything in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, how about I do a little bullet list?
There you go.
A couple
I like bullet
things.
points.
Yeah. The first thing I got to say is this, like you said, passion. Passion is huge. And, but at the same time, it's not everything. I know a lot of people say, oh, just follow your passion and everything's going to work out. And there is truth to that, but it's not the entire truth. Passion without, like you said, perseverance and discipline and actually improving at your craft, learning how to talk behind the microphone, having content that people actually want to hear. I mean, if you don't have any of that stuff, passion's not going to get you very far.
Right.
And I get tired of people saying, "Oh, it's all about the passion." I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, you're right, but like I said, it's not the end of the story.
It takes a little bit more than that. Yes,
totally. And I think, one of the things that I say this a lot. You have to ask yourself, is this something that you really, really are going after as far as from a business standpoint? Now, if you're doing this for a hobby, go for it. Have fun. Absolutely do it and enjoy it. And it will be hard, but enjoy it. Like, make sure you enjoy it. But if this is something you want to pursue as a business, in some way or another, if you want to get paid, or you want it to, maybe a podcast is even helping to grow an already existing business or something. And I've had this conversation with my co-host Emily, because her passion is writing, even though she's a podcaster, and she still loves passion. She still has that passion for podcasting, but she has expressed this is not her full-time pursuit.
It's not her end game. I get that.
Exactly. But to understand that and admit that is really important. So if your end game is a successful podcast, then know it and admit it and go for it. That's the first thing you got to figure out.
Excellent.
I also would have to say that, and this is the thing that I preached and I did not understand it and I didn't live it until it got smacked in my face, is being the best you. And I say that over and over and over and over on Profitcast. And it wasn't until I stopped listening to people telling me to go and teach, which was ironic because I knew I wasn't a teacher. I've known that for probably 10 years.
Right.
And yet I still followed their advice because I'd had no other advice to follow. And even though I know I do teach as a byproduct, I know that, but teaching as a pursuit is not my passion. By knowing that my passion was performance and that my mission in life is to encourage and empower someone to the point of making a difference in their life, if I was being true to myself, then I would go out and just do that, and I would find a way to make it happen. And it wasn't until I actually said, this is what I'm going to do. I don't care what the odds are. I don't know how crazy this is or not, because everybody's telling me it's crazy. I'm going after this because it's who I am and it's what I need to do in this world. That's when things started to happen, because I wasn't being true to myself prior.
There you go. Excellent.
So beyond that, there's a huge thing to, if you're going to get behind the microphone, remember it is a performance. In a way it is, because body language accounts for over 90% of our communication. And since you are on audio, you don't have the physical body language thing there going on. So the rest of it really comes down to how you present yourself. And the words are important, but how you present yourself is more important to a listener. So that's something. Work on your craft with podcasting. That's something that's very important that I think a lot of people forget. And then, yes, there is also the aspect of, is your content valuable? Is it something that people want? Are you actually going to let people know you exist? That's your whole marketing thing, telling people about it, letting people know, getting involved in other communities. And then here's another thing that I've heard this time and time again, is, if you really want to grow your podcast, you have to basically create relationships and friendships with your listeners. And I've heard that over and over and over and over. It wasn't until I went to Dragon Con a couple of weeks ago where I got to experience meeting my listeners for the first time in person.
Okay.
And to hear what our podcast has meant to them on a personal level.
Yeah.
Which, let me just tell you right now, that blew my mind. I had no idea what we were doing with that show. And It wasn't until that moment that I realized we've been pouring into relationships. And I mean pouring in and pouring in and pouring in and pouring in with basically no return for so long. And I've been doing that with Profitcast too, constantly giving and giving and giving. Hence my little, meltdown at the year mark, going, what's happening? Does anybody care? And am I ever doing anything? Relationships take time. And I think we all forget that. I forgot it. People tell me, build relationships. I was building relationships. I wasn't seeing any return on that. And I'm like, why not? Because it takes a long time for people to know, like, and trust you. And until you have broken down, again, I heard this example of a friendship and a relationship is like a seed. You have to break down the outer shell in order for the seed to grow and then thrive from there. And I thought, it really is a friendship. You have to break down a person's outer boundaries to the point where they can and will trust you. And then the relationship grows from there. And I just thought, wow, that's, you hear that, but you don't really realize that that's what it takes. And it takes a long time, and to not give up. Is that enough?
And the last thing, and to not give, that was your last bullet point.
Yeah, don't give up.
As you were telling that story about Dragon Con, it's interesting. One of our podcasters just had that same experience. He was down there. He does a few shows for us, but one of them is Next Stop Everywhere, which is a Doctor Who podcast.
Nice.
And he said he was walking around in his, T-shirt with his TARDIS on it, and he'd see anybody that was Doctor Who, and he'd walk up and say, oh, hi, and get in a little conversation. And that was his strategy. Get in a little conversation, and here's a card, and hey, did you know I'm on this podcast? He said more than once he ran into people that went, oh my gosh, you're Jesse.
Oh, wow.
And he had no idea that anyone was even listening.
Yeah.
You see the numbers, but these were faces. These were people that went lit up because you're that guy. I love your show.
Yeah.
And that really is, I think that's part of the takeaway that you maybe didn't intend. But as a podcaster, don't be that guy that doesn't leave your mom's basement at some point.
Mm-hmm.
We do live shows, and people come out and pour love on us at the live shows. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And we go to Comic-Cons and we meet people, and, we're not sitting there in a booth. We're just talking to people. But every once in a while, somebody will say oh my gosh, you're the guy that does this. Or for us, we love when they talk about our shows, not about us, Martha and I, but if they said, oh, we love Jesse's show. I even get it when people tell me they love Profitcast just because we were on and I know you.
Yeah.
And I get a charge and I go, that is awesome.
That is cool.
So I think that's excellent advice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for being on.
Oh, you're well. Do you mind if I share 2 other stories?
No, share away. And then before we go, share social media. Because if I don't say that now, we're going to hang up and it's going to go away. So let's hear those stories and let's hear that social media.
Yeah. So, I mean, and like I said, every listener matters to me, really. And I really, truly mean that, just because, friendships and relationships are very important to me. And I hear some incredible stories, and I could share so many stories. We'd go on for 2 hours, but I'm not going to do that. But I save every single email or tweet or whatever that comes in that is some kind of a thank you for your show, and here's why. I save every one of them. I have them all.
Excellent.
But what was really interesting is I think what has shocked me is that doing something like Profitcast, I'm learning. I'm on a journey. And when John Lee Dumas told me in January, I listened to your show, I thought, why? Why would you listen to me? You've succeeded. You're the king of podcasting. Why would, But then later, what's been really interesting is that he's encouraged me through the last 9 months of podcasting. Little email here and there of encouragement.
Yeah.
And I thought, here's a dude who is so busy, makes millions of dollars a year, taking time out of his schedule to encourage someone like me. I'm a nobody. And I thought, that's neat. When a listener can give back like that. And like I said, I have countless stories of this kind of stuff. Which has blown my mind, absolutely blown my mind. I never expected this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I heard this. The second story was Podcast Movement. So I know this guy, right? I'd heard of him. I know this podcast. He's a famous name. But if you're into gaming, you probably heard of Gamertag Radio. It's a CBS podcast, and Danny Pena is one of the hosts anyway. And it was so funny because I'm thinking, I know this guy's name. This is awesome. He tweets and he says, man, listen to Profitcast right now. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's this is incredible.
Well, another great guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Another great guy. So then, we're at Podcast Movement. He gets inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. And I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of a big deal. We run into each other in the elevator. And I thought, I thought it was him. I wasn't 100% sure just because, pictures and meeting somebody in person.
Right.
And I was with another guy, and he's like, dude, you got to say, let's rock it. You got to say, let's rock it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, all right, let's rock. And he goes, you are the real Brian. And this guy goes, wait, you're the real Brian of Profitcast? And he's like, I'm Danny. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So then we ended up talking later, but the moral of the story on this one is he kept saying over and over, he goes, I heard your last episode of Profitcast, or, the title. I heard your struggles. I've been following your journey. He goes, I just want you to know you never know who is listening.
Yeah.
And you may never know. So never give up. He goes, you've got to keep this going. And I'm encouraging other podcasters to do the same thing, that you never know who's listening. It could be someone who, you change their life. I mean, literally change their life, maybe save their life even. It could be somebody who is big and loves what you do so much, gives you an opportunity that you would have never expected. I mean, there's just so many potentials out there. So you never know who's listening, and you may never know whoever listens and what kind of impact that you actually have on these people. You may never know, but know that you do. And I think that's the important thing, is that if you're there, your passion's there, you do this because you want to do this, you will impact people. Even if it's one person, that may be just enough. But I just wanted to share those stories because it opened my eyes, and I just literally heard about all of this stuff in the last couple of months. And I had no idea. And I seriously was ready to quit because I didn't think anybody cared. And then I heard these stories and I went, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. Yes. Well, Brian, I will concur. Don't give up. I love your show. I think you're a great guy. There's nothing but success ahead. You just got to keep hanging on.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Rob. And, so you wanted me to share all the information. I remembered.
Yes. I want to hear the social media, and then we will let you go on your way.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is a good chat. I just enjoyed these conversations.
Yeah. Truly my pleasure.
All right. So Profitcast is at profitcastuniverse.com. All my contact information is on there. Arrow Squad. If you like the TV show Arrow, that's what we talk about. It's arrowsquad.com. My Twitter handle is at I am the real Brian or at Profitcast, either one of them. And then, of course, if you want to check out the new podcast that I'm working on right now, if you're an audiobook lover, a book lover, period, audiobooks.com. That's where we're at. It's a lot of fun. Addie and I are having a great time. We're getting ready to really interview some fun authors here soon. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then the Podcaster's Paradise podcast, which we're interviewing podcasters, and we're hearing about their stories from, pre-launch to massive success and all the stuff in between, origin stories, all that.
Fantastic.
Podcastersparadise.com.
Excellent.
Yeah, man.
Well, I will start directing people your way for that too, because I do run into a few podcasters.
Yeah, and just a couple.
Just a couple. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Brian, so much. Rob. And it's an open door. Anytime you want to chat, I would love to have you on again.
Appreciate it.
Well, that's it. Thanks again to Brian for being on. I walked away with so many great ideas, and I hope you did too. Please follow us on Facebook. Look for New Media Lab. Follow us on our website, which is www.southgatemediagroup.com. You can follow me on Twitter at @rsouthgate, and you can follow our company at SMG Pods. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Until then, keep creating.